So one of the most important things that you can do, and it's very basic when you are representing yourself in a lawsuit, is to make sure that you understand the importance of keeping track of relevant dates. Inside today's video, I'm going to talk about calendaring and how attorneys use it to effectively manage their litigation matters. Hi, and thanks for joining me. I'm Peter Lamont. I am a business attorney and the host of utlradio.com, your business success and legal information station. Today I want to talk about something that seems really basic, calendaring, but can have such an absolute impact on your case. It can ruin your chance of being successful in a case. It can really have such a severe impact that you could lose on a case where you might have everything else in your favor, but you blow a date. Now, again, it sounds simple, right? We all use a calendar, whether it's on our phones or our tablets, computers, or even the old pen and paper, version that like my wife likes to use to keep track of your family events. So we all know how to keep track of dates. You've got a party, you've got a concert, you've got a kid's sporting event, and it all goes on the calendar. Well, obviously, calendaring is the same thing that you do in your everyday life that you would need to do with your litigation. However, I would suggest that you do something a little bit different. Okay, so for example, understand first of all that dates in litigation matters, either dates that are set forth by statutes or court rules, or dates that are assigned by judges, are critical. It's not like, you miss or you're late to your kid's birthday party. Okay, it doesn't have that same impact. Sure, your kid might be upset, but you're not going to lose your kid because you were late to the birthday party. Now, in litigation, it's possible that you lose your case because you're late or you don't show. So understanding the value of keeping track of these dates is critical to your success. So you need to know from the beginning of your case, what are the important dates? What are the relevant dates? And then you need to write them down. It is not okay to just try to keep track of things in your head when it comes to litigation. You're going to be doing so many things that trying to keep track of dates is just something that you don't need to have floating around in your head. Write it down on paper. So I'm going to give you kind of an example of what an attorney traditionally does with respect to dates. So let's say you're a plaintiff and you are, in your case, you're a pro se litigant. But an attorney representing a plaintiff would write down the deadline for the statute of limitations. So in other words, if it's a particular type of case, a negligence case, they'll either know or look up what the statute of limitations is for that case, and they'll write it down. They'll calendar it. Attorneys sometimes call it diarying. Now, I can't spell that, so you don't even ask, but to diary something simply means to put it in your diary or calendar. Years ago, attorneys used to use these gigantic red diary books that were calendars, and they also had all of the relevant telephone numbers for the courts and the judges and the law clerks and other firms as well. And it was in this book called the Lawyer's Manual, Lawyer's Diary and Manual. And for years and years, that's what people used. And when they would refer to putting something in the diary, they would really be referring to this giant red book. But, that has kind of gone the way of the dinosaur. There are still some attorneys out there that like these red books, but the internet makes the red book, in my opinion, obsolete. So when you hear somebody, this is just an aside, somebody talking about diarying something, that's typically what they mean and where it has come from. But getting back to that case where the attorney would take it, he's a plaintiff's attorney, he would write down the statute of limitations so that he knows I must file the complaint by X date, because if you blow a statute of limitations, there is no second chance. So this is one of those things that I was talking about where, unlike you missing your kid's birthday party, you've got a little social stigma, but aside from that, no big deal. Here, you blow that statute of limitations, you cannot file your case. And that's a big risk to take, trying to just keep it in your head and not write it down on paper, because we just have so much going through our minds on a daily basis. Now, moving into a case, let's say you're a defendant. Well, you need to know when your answer is due. And how do you find this information out? Well, it's actually easier than you would think. When you're served with a complaint in most jurisdictions, it says right on the summons how long you have to respond to the complaint. And if you don't know, you simply look at the court rules. And in another video, I'm going to talk about court rules and finding the court rules and how you use them. You know, regardless of what state you're in, court rules are generally set up the same way. So I'm going to talk about that in another video. But suffice it to say that if you're looking for deadlines for an answer, or maybe to serve discovery, you can go right to the court rules, and it's typically in there. You'll be able to find out, what the dates are. Now, there's also something in the court rules that would let you know what your state does with weekends and holidays. So, for example, let's say, there's a date that says you've got 20 days from the date that you're served with this discovery demand to provide a response. Well, is that 20 business days? Is that 20 days but not including Sunday? Is it 20 days, but, here comes St. Patrick's Day, so does that count? Well, you can look in the court rules, and it will tell you how to calculate those days. And it'll tell you Sundays might not be included, holidays might not be included. It's all there. It's just a matter of going through and reading it. But then you do that most important step, which is what this video is about, which is writing those deadlines down on a calendar. Make sure that you know when your discovery is due, when the other side is supposed to provide you with discovery. Why is that important? Well, let's say you serve discovery and they have 20 days to respond, and you don't write that date down, so you don't really remember when their responses are due, and they don't give them to you. And now they're 30, 40 days behind, and you didn't realize it until one day you pick up your file and you're like, oh man, I served this 2 months ago, and they didn't respond. Well, now you've lost all this time to do something with that information if you had had it. You could have been formulating deposition questions. Maybe you needed to supplement your demands. So knowing when the other side has to provide you with responses is just as important, in my opinion, as knowing when you have to provide responses, because it allows you to plan your next move. If they don't respond, I can send out a good faith letter. If they don't respond to that, I can file a motion. But you need to know those dates. Okay. Now, again, moving forward past the discovery phase, you've got motion dates. And I guess some of this can be intertwined within the discovery phase, like if you have to file a motion to compel. You need to know what are your dates within which you can file your motion. Does it have to be something that's filed 60 days before trial? Or, if you file your motion, how long does the other side have to oppose it? And then once they oppose it, how long do you have to write a reply? All of these dates are key critical factors that you need to understand. And I think the easiest way to explain it is like this. Everything that you do in your lawsuit has a date and a deadline. Everything. So if you're doing something and you're not aware of a date or a deadline, you should look into it to find out if there is one, because chances are there will be. All right. Now, the other thing that you want to be aware of is things like court orders, because maybe the judge is taking your case and they're going to case management, which I'll explain in another video. But let's say it's a case management thing where the judge is going to kind of extend the traditional discovery deadlines. Well, if that judge issues you an order and says, I want you to do this by this date, you better do it. Otherwise, you have violated a court order, and there's penalties for that. So be aware of both the statutory and court rule deadlines, and then if you have a court order, make sure you understand you need to comply with that. Write those dates on the calendar. When I receive a court order, I immediately have someone in my office put the dates on the calendar. And I'm going to give you a trick or a tip in a second that I think everyone should do. But I just want to highlight the importance of making sure that as soon as you get a date or a deadline, that it goes on the calendar. Now, here's the tip that I like to use. If I have a deadline of, let's say, December 30th, that's my deadline, I don't want to just put that date on the calendar and forget about it. What I do is I go a week before and I include a reminder. Deadline to file this document is December 30th. That gives me a week buffer. The worst thing that happens is the day before something's due, you look at the calendar for that next day and you're surprised, oh crap, I've got to do this whole motion and it's due tomorrow. Panic, and how am I going to get it to the court? You don't want that. So what I like to do is I like to put a few dates, at least one, but sometimes I'll do two, in advance, letting me know about the deadline. And that has worked for me for years, so I would encourage you to use that tip because it definitely does save you some of that last minute, oh my gosh, panic and craziness. One final thing, you've got to be really aware of your specific jurisdiction's time periods, because in some states they have these programs. I don't know how else to describe them, but let me give you an example. So in New Jersey, when you have a personal injury case, at the conclusion of the case, before there is a trial, you must attend a mandatory, non-binding arbitration. And it's really in the courtroom with another attorney, an attorney that's not in any way connected with your case. And he or she sits down and listens to the arguments on both sides and says, I'm going to decide that you should pay X. Now, this is specific to New Jersey. And remember, it's mandatory and non-binding, which is tricky because in other videos I've talked to you about arbitration being binding. But here's this kind of enigma, this rule that New Jersey uses that is New Jersey specific, this idea of a non-binding arbitration. And you have 30 days from the date that that award is issued to file they call it a trial de novo, meaning you reject the arbitrator's award and you want to move forward with trial. I have seen so many attorneys either get sued or have serious problems because they've blown that date. Their office didn't put it on the calendar. Here's the deadline to file the trial de novo. And they go into court, and I've seen them argue, Judge, please, it was a clerical error. Judges don't care. Too bad. The rule is the rule, and there's no exception, especially with something like a trial de novo for New Jersey's non-binding arbitration program. So just by way of illustration, I'm just highlighting the absolute importance of making sure that you calendar all of your dates and deadlines. So to sum it all up, here's what I want you to do. Every time you get a date, put it on the calendar. If you are taking an action in a case, make sure you look to see if there is a date or a deadline. Put it on the calendar. If you get a court order and it's got dates, put them on the calendar. Don't wait till the next day. When you find out what the deadline is, put it on the calendar immediately. And my tip is to make sure that you calendar a reminder 1 or 2 weeks before your actual deadline. That way it gives you a buffer and some time to prepare whatever it is that you might need to do before that deadline approaches. I hope that this helps, and I just hope you understand the importance of keeping your litigation calendar in order. It's an area where so many attorneys run into ethical and malpractice issues, and I don't want to see that happen to you as a pro se litigant. So make sure you understand the importance of taking the dates, putting them on the calendar, and reminding yourself. All right, that's going to do it for today's video. I want to thank you all for watching, and I want to remind you to make sure that you subscribe to the channel because we have a large number of videos, and we're constantly putting out new videos with some information that might be helpful to you both in business and in the law, and some information about how to properly represent yourself pro se. I really think that there are a significant number of legal matters that people can handle on their own without an attorney. They just need some guidance, and that's what I hope to give you through utlradio.com. Speaking of utlradio.com, don't forget to subscribe to the podcast, because the podcast, and there's links below, contains different information than what we have on the video channel. The podcast is a 5-day-a-week broadcast, and we answer legal questions, business questions. There's a news show and an interview show and a weekly wrap-up. So make sure you subscribe to the podcast by clicking the link below as well. And finally, we are in the process of finalizing the new utlradio.com website, where you can go for all of this information, podcasts, the app. You can download a free app. videos, everything will be there. You can go there now. It's the old site, and we're hoping that within the next week, we'll have the new site up and running. And then I'd love to hear your feedback on that new site. All right, thank you all for watching. And make sure you share this information with your friends, family, and colleagues, and let them know about utlradio.com, your business success and legal information station. I'll see you next time.